So our next session, the next 25 minutes, half an hour, we're very, very lucky to have John Mueller from Google join us. And hello, John. I can see you've joined.
Hi, James.
Hey, John. How are you?
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. So firstly, thank you very, very much for joining us this afternoon. Yeah, really, really excited to have you here. I think there's a lot of questions come in. And yeah, we're really excited to have a chat. Really, you know, let's obviously I know we've shared some of the questions that we had come in sort of in advance. So let's see where we go. So how are things your end anyway?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah,
it's nice and summery here. So
yeah, you're over in Switzerland, aren't you?
Yeah, perfect time to go on vacation if you could travel.
No, absolutely, absolutely. We're glad you're keeping well anyway. So let's jump into the questions that we've had shared from the attendees. So I mean, the first one that we've had come in is that it's common for PR coverage to syndicate across multiple publications that are owned by the same news network. Often these articles canonicalize to an original article, but not always. So two pivot questions from this. If these do canonicalize, is it right to assume that there is authority being consolidated into the canonical version, which means therefore any link would pass more page rank? Or is that not the case?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of stuff packed into this question. So
yes.
I think in general, it's worth in mind understanding that with canonicalization, we basically pick one URL as the primary URL for that piece of content. And we essentially concentrate all of the signals that we have into that single URL.
Yes.
And we pick that URL through a number of different factors. On the one hand, of course, the content should be equivalent. That's kind of the important the baseline consideration. Then we take things into account like rel canonical, redirect on a page, links internally, externally, all of the different signals that we have that kind of come together where we would say, well, this is a clear sign that this is the page that you want to hit. And with syndicated content, that's sometimes a bit tricky because it's like maybe it's just like one article within a bigger page, and essentially these individual pages have enough content of their own to stand on their own as well. So it's not necessarily something where we would say, well, there's a rel canonical here. We will just automatically, blindly canonicalize everything together.
Yes.
So that's kind of the one thing to keep in mind. So
okay, absolutely. And then what about if these syndicated articles do not use rel equals canonical? I know one of the questions that often comes up is that there can then be duplicate content linking to a site. And one of the questions that often comes is, will these be devalued and should they be added to a disavow file?
Oh, they're not bad. I mean, just because these different syndicated articles are indexed individually isn't a sign that there's anything wrong with them. And it's not that duplicate content in this sense is something that will penalize the site that's hosting the duplicate content or the site that's being linked to. It's essentially, from our side, kind of a side effect of us not being able to recognize that these pages are essentially the same.
Of course. Okay, fantastic. And then as a follow-on from that, really, you know, I started talking about disavowing the disavow file. Is there still a need for SEOs and marketers to still be proactively disavowing? I know you guys at Google have made, you know, a lot of statements that you are, in an ideal world, the majority of webmasters do not need to be filing a disavow file. What's the current take on that?
That's still the case.
Yeah.
Nothing really has changed there. I think if we would expect people to use the disavow tool more often or kind of on a regular basis, we would tie it into Search Console. But it's really something where we see very few people actually need to use it. So it's something we try to keep out of Search Console a little bit to kind of discourage people from getting that fear of missing out with regards to disavow files.
Absolutely.
It's not that you need to do something everywhere. So we're kind of
right. No, that's good to hear and good to get confirmation on once again, as I know you've given in the past, John. So moving on to our second question that's come in. As PRs, as marketers, we're often asked to provide comments to journalists for them to use in their articles. And one of the things that often comes up is who should be giving this comment? Should it be a member of the marketing team who is often the one dealing with the press? or should it be a product specialist? Now, I know we could probably talk all day about the concept of EAT, but from a perspective of demonstrating industry expertise, is it recommended that the name of a specialist within a business is the person whose name sits alongside a quote that the press is covering? Or does it really not matter who that is when we are referencing?
Now, it's essentially up to you.
Yes.
It's something where in individual situations, it might make sense for kind of the users, the readers of that content to have a tie-in with someone who's technical or someone who knows what they're talking about there. Or maybe it's more important that you have a really official voice of the company that's providing a statement. Like, those are different options. And it's not a matter of SEO there. It's really more a matter of like how you interact with people.
It's looking at marketing and the brand perspective, isn't it? And I think it probably ties back to the trust that goes alongside that voice. I think it's, as marketers and as SEOs, we should all be coming back to the fact that we are marketers, and who is the most authoritative person to be giving that quote, to be giving that response to a journalist.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. It's good to hear your take on that. And question 3 that we had come in was, would you recommend that blogs, guides, and other similar content that sits on a business's website should be published under specific author profiles rather than published blindly without reference to who created the content? And then almost as a follow-up, should this then be marked up with author schema? Again, I think more on the perception of the topic of authorship and who is behind, and is it an authoritative voice behind that content?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the authorship markup is gone, so at least that part is not something to worry about.
Absolutely.
I can see it making sense to kind of tie the content in with individual voices, especially when it comes to content that is potentially problematic, where you really need an expert to kind of comment on a specific topic, to write about something, or where you really want to make sure that what you're providing is something that has been reviewed by an expert. So from that point of view, that definitely makes sense. And with regards to kind of the structured data on that page, there are certain types of page-level schema.org markup types that do have room for an author information. So I'd use that where you can, but it's something where I would definitely primarily put it on the page so that people can find it there.
Fantastic, great, good to hear. Thank you very much on that. So I'm going to come on to the, you knew this was coming up. I'm going to come on to the topic of guest posting. I know this has been probably the hottest topic, and it's reared its ugly head once again. I think every, over the last probably 10 years, I see this come up every couple of years. We see this discussion around guest posting, and I know way back in sort of 2012, 2013, Matt Cutts was saying guest posting is dead. But I think, here we are sort of 7-8 years later, still having the same discussion. And one of the questions that came in was, someone was wondering if you could elaborate on your recent tweet about guest posts. Do interviews count as guest posts that would fall foul of Google guidelines? Or how about contributions to a digital magazine that are published by a guest author?
Okay, wow, yeah. I mean, our stance on links and guest posts has kind of been pretty stable for a while. So I'm kind of curious from your point of view why you think this discussion keeps coming up. Is I don't know that we're missing that we.
No, I mean, I certainly from somebody who runs an SEO agency, my take is that there is whenever yourself or somebody else at Google says guest posting doesn't work, obviously we see this big flurry of people who say guest posting links still do work. Obviously, we see there are businesses out there who are prolifically selling what they would class as guest posts, and I think it comes back to that. It is whether we look at guest posts, I mean, I saw the shift from pre-Penguin, where a lot of SEOs were using private blog networks, were using black hat tactics, and obviously that pivot in many cases. I think the majority of us will remember sites like My Blog Guest, where it was essentially a blog post exchange. Now, I mean, I think what I certainly see in the questions I get from time to time is, if you are contributing to a publication, let's say I write for Search Engine Journal for the SEMrush blog as an example, that is, in theory, that's not being done for links. And I think probably that the question where a lot of confusion comes up is if you aren't guest posting for the purpose of solely building links, but you get a link in that content, say reference an article, should they have a rel equals no follow, or a rel, should they have a rel equals no follow? And I think that's probably where the confusion comes up. The answer here was an interview. If you give an interview and the site that hosted the interview chooses to link to your site as almost a credit, how should that be handled?
Yeah, I think with interviews, it feels like something that is significantly different than normal.
Yes, of course, I would agree.
So that's something where I would say they're written by someone else. Like maybe like you give some input there in the form of this interview situation, but essentially they're written by someone else.
Of course.
From that point of view, that's something that I would see as not being a normal guest post, and I wouldn't really worry about how the links are handled there.
Of course.
Because that's something where maybe you'll go out and say, well, it's like my site, example.com, and someone will use that and place a link there. But essentially, how they link to it, how they choose to link with a no follow or not, that's essentially up to them.
Yeah, and it's editorial. It's editorial.
Yeah.
And I think the way I've always interpreted it is that when we talk about guest posts, it's how much control. If you are writing, and the second part of this question that we had in was how about contributions to digital magazines? If you are creating a piece of content that somebody else publishes, but you are writing that and you link to one of your own sites or assets, in theory, you are controlling where that links to. You are controlling that. And I think that's often where the confusion comes. And I mean, I've always interpreted it as if you are creating that content, then it is essentially what you guys at Google would see as should having a no follow attribute.
Yeah, I kind of see, I definitely see that side of the story, and I also see kind of this middle ground of where you're essentially creating an article for another site, kind of similar to how you would do it if you were kind of like a full-time staff employee of that site.
Of course.
So those are kind of situations where I'd say, well, it's more like an editorial article that was just published there.
Of course.
So
that's really, really insightful, Jonathan. That's given an awful lot of clarity around some of the conversations that have been going on in recent weeks. And I know following the thread on Twitter the other day, I mean, I think it's the context of it. The word guest post means, what does it mean nowadays? And I think it means what people want it to mean, and they will try and shoehorn it into being what they can to try and get a clarification that they can be using that to build links.
I think one way to look at it also is to look at the bigger picture for the site.
Yes, of course.
It's like, are all the links like this? Then probably that's problematic. Yeah. But are there individual links where essentially you were collaborating with a site and they just took your content one-to-one? That's like the way it is. Like sometimes that's how things end up. So
fantastic.
That's also something where I kind of have two individual things that I look at with regards to links in general.
Yes.
To kind of, as a simple way of mapping it in my mind. On the one hand, if as a site owner, I don't care if it's a no-follow link or not, like I essentially want to get information out,
of course,
then that's usually a sign that this is a natural link. And the other thing is, if as a site owner, I'm specifying the anchor text, then that's usually a sign that it's like there's a little bit more involved here rather than just someone writing about the site. But there's kind of the gray zone all around all of this. So
of course,
it's not
absolutely.
something you can just blindly follow. So
absolutely, no. Fantastic. No, that's a really, really great response, John. Thank you very much for that. So the next question that came in was that it's not uncommon for PR campaigns to naturally earn links from publications in multiple different countries and languages, and that even when a PR team has not directly pitched to these publications. So one of the things that is often seen amongst discussions amongst SEOs is that these links could be seen as being unnatural and that should be added to a disavow file. Can you comment on this?
Well, if you're getting links from sites that you're not reaching out to, that seems like the perfect kind of link,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
It seems like you're creating good content that people like and they want to link to it. So
yes,
from that point of view, that seems like something that's totally unproblematic. It feels more kind of iffy if you're expecting that only people that you reach out to link to your site. And that's kind of hinting at, well, maybe you're like just doing this purely for the links, and that
Of
might be
course.
something where you kind of need to be a little bit cautious.
Okay.
But essentially, you definitely don't need to disavow these kind of links.
Absolutely, and the fact that they're coming from other countries and other languages again isn't not a sign that these links are unnatural as long as they are editorially placed.
Yeah, yeah.
Would they be held in a I know it's a complex question this, but would they be held in a lower weighting than a regionally specific link if the site was topically relevant?
No, not
No?
necessarily. I think sometimes it's a matter of understanding which country things are from. If we need to understand the
Of course,
geotargeting of a
yes.
site a little bit better,
Absolutely.
that sometimes helps. But it's not the case that it's like links from other countries are bad or problematic or anyway.
Of course,
Really,
absolutely.
just like sometimes we'd like to figure out what country this site is targeting. And the other
Absolutely.
thing is, of course, the anchor text. If the anchor text is in some other language with other words in it,
Of
then
course.
it's kind of providing that context there. And
Of
that's not
course.
necessarily bad. It can just mean
Yeah.
that people searching in those languages might also find your site, which is
Of course.
kind of okay.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely. That's great to hear. So, with no-follow links now treated as a hint rather than a directive, how is this likely to impact any page rank passed from earned PR coverage? So, many top-tier news publications over the past few years have adopted site-wide no-follow and external links for some time, obviously for many different reasons. Will this now change the potential perceived, and I don't like calling this, but the SEO value of a no-follow link from a newspaper article, or does the hint mean that Googlebot is following these links pretty much just to discover other web pages?
So I think first of all, it's something just to be really clear. We don't recommend
Yes.
doing no site-wide no follow.
Okay.
So essentially, if you have a website and you can't trust the links on your site at all, then that seems like something that you need to figure out kind of first. It's kind of like if you want to publish content, then you look at the text, you double check that this matches what you want to stand for online, and you also double check the links. And if you're OK with the links that are provided there, if they make sense for you, if they're a part of kind of the editorial content that you're providing, then not having a no follow on those links is perfectly fine.
Of course.
That's kind of out of the way. I know
Yes.
I'm preaching to the choir there because
Yeah.
but anyway. And the other thing is that this is really more something that we would use for discovering new sites. So
Yeah.
the kind of understanding the no-follow links. And we have seen in some regions that we can't find sites at all. When they're mentioned in the news, maybe local news sites, but they're always with no-follow links, then we can't find them at all. So
Of course.
for kind of the normal type of website, it's not something where it would make sense to go out and do like a no-follow link building campaign or anything
Yes,
crazy.
of course.
So
Absolutely.
I would see these primarily as a source of traffic. Like people can go to your site if they like what they see. Maybe they'll write about it as well. But not see it as something where it's like, well, at least I got a no-follow link, and that will give me like 1/10 of the SEO value.
Of course, yeah.
That's not
absolutely good. No, that's great. Thank you, John, for that. So the last question that we had submitted in advance, and I mean, we may need to interpret this between us, is: do sponsored links confer any SEO benefit, even with regard to adding context to your domain? I mean, I think there's two ways we could understand this. I am interpreting this as meaning followed links that are paid for, rather than that have the relatively new rel equals sponsored tag.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's how I'm understanding it. I think I'm understanding this as meaning sponsored links as in paid for links.
Yeah. It kind of depends. So if we, well, like it depends. Like probably you're hearing a lot nowadays. But if it's something where it's obvious to our systems that these are sponsored links, if it's, I don't know, an ad banner on top of the page and all the links there are just kind of all the same, then that's something our systems would essentially just ignore. So we would treat them essentially like a no-follow link.
Of course, absolutely.
We would drop them completely. With regards to other kinds of sponsored links where it's maybe less obvious to us if we shouldn't ignore them or not, then they could be adding some context there.
Of course.
And I think in the bigger picture for a website that's active in lots of different regions with lots of different kind of touch points for users, it's kind of normal that some of the sponsored content that you're putting out there, some of the sponsored work that you're providing, if you sponsor a football team or something, then like some of those links are not going to have a relevant font attached to it.
Of course.
From our point of view, that's fine. It's like the web is not clean. We have to live with how messy it is.
Yeah, of course. And I think it comes, if you are sponsoring a football team, the reality is that you're not doing that to try and manipulate the search engines. You're doing that for other visibility. And if the webmaster places a link, it's find a small football club whose webmaster knows what a rel equals no follow is anyway. I think it's that's great. So they're the questions that we had in advance, John. We've had a couple come through on the chat, which I'll just turn to now. So the first of these was, how much does the relevancy of the page that you get a link from affect the influence of that link on your site? Are a handful of relevant links more effective than 1,000 non-relevant links, as an example?
So I guess if you look at PageRank, that's definitely the case, because if a page has a higher PageRank in our systems, then links from there will be seen as a little bit stronger than links from random parts of the web. So from that point of view, that's certainly the case. With regards to PageRank in general, I think people focus on it a little bit too much, though. And it's usually not the case that you can go out and say, oh, I want a link from the BBC or from 10 blogs. It's not like something that you can easily choose. So kind of take what you get, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to how to measure relevancy, as a marketer. It's what would you instill there, in terms of measuring relevancy other than the content of the linking page. I mean, I know there's Majestic Trust Flow as an example, which of course are not Google metrics. So in terms of measuring relevancy, what would your insight be there as a marketer to taking a look at how relevant the links are?
I don't know. I don't know these tools. I know Dixon Jones has done lots of really cool stuff with his tools. I know there's some other kind of link-based tools out there as well that do probably equally interesting things, probably in different ways. But I don't know like how I would quantify the relevance of a link like that. I think it's kind of easy to kind of judge qualitatively when you have like BBC versus random blogs. Of
course,
like between a bunch of blogs, how would you say?
It gets complex. Absolutely. No, that's all good. So two more, which are not necessarily link related. Well, one more. So from this more SEO related, is from a ranking perspective, is there any difference between different SSL assurance levels? So, for example, would Google favor extended validation SSL over low assurance SSL?
No. From our point of view, they're all the same.
Fantastic. Okay, that's good. That's good to hear. And the last question that we had in, and I don't know what the aim is here, but John, why don't you have a knowledge panel?
I don't know. I think it comes with having a name that lots of other people have as well.
Yeah.
But it allows me to kind of stay under the cover as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's so good. So that's everything from Aaron, John. I just want to take a moment to say thank you very, very much for joining us. That was a lot of fun. Some really great insights to clear up, hopefully, some of the questions that our attendees have, especially around guest posting. I know that's the big hot topic, and hopefully one day we won't be having to have these conversations, but at the moment we are. And I think whilst people are using guest posting, those conversations will continue. But as always, John, thank you very much for giving your time, for answering the questions. And it was, fantastic to have you here. So thank you once again from all of us.
Thanks, James.
No worries. Thank you very much, John. And we'll catch up soon.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, John. Okay, so that was really, really great. Fantastic to have John on, hopefully to clear up some of the questions that we all have actually around links. We had some great questions shared in advance, and really great to get John and Google's take on some of these.